whenever you guys are ready, you can start. Yeah, we're ready. All right, great. Well, thank you for being here, and if you don't mind, just briefly introduce yourself and your purpose for sitting here with me today.
Okay. My name is James Watnes. I'm here to support the 169 Engineer Battalion, conduct their history update of the Sapper Leader Course to help fill in the gaps of the Sapper Leader Course from 85 till present. And my tenure here at the Sapper Leader Course to help fill in those gaps.
Great. Thank you. And if you briefly describe your military experience, your background, how you came to the Army, just your general timeline has been in the Army and your progression.
Okay, my timeline in the Army. Well, I joined the Army in '87, in November of '87, and came to Fort Leonard Wood for basic training in AIT. Came in as a combat engineer, but I wanted to go airborne. I made sure that I wanted to go airborne because I was going to be a tanker, but airborne and tankers just don't go good together. So I went combat engineer because, they showed me the high-speed video and blowing some stuff up, and it seemed very interesting. So I enlisted as a combat engineer in '87 and started basic training December 3rd of '87 as a combat engineer, then went to airborne school, then was assigned to Germany, the 78th Engineer Battalion. From there I was just a combat engineer in a mechanized engineer battalion, and conducted 3 years as a combat engineer. Then from Germany, I was assigned to Fort Bragg to Bravo Company 307th Engineer Battalion, the 82nd Airborne Division, where I was a specialist promotable, soon to be a team leader in an Airborne Engineer Battalion. And that's where I went to Ranger School, Sapper School, a lot of other schools, for leadership and light leader tactics, to support the Light Infantry Battalion in the 82nd Airborne Division. I held team leader positions and squad leader positions at that time. Then shortly after I graduated Ranger School, I came on orders to be a sapper instructor. I was an E5 promotable at the time, and got here. I was kind of the only sergeant working at the Sapper Leader Course, but I was promotable. So I had a lot of burden on my shoulders being a sergeant, Ranger qualified to be selected to work at the Sapper Leader Course. So there was a lot of pressure on me. So once I, eventually made the, cut off and made staff sergeant, and I was an instructor rider for both the GS phase and the patrolling phase. And then left there and went to Korea for a year. Then they assigned me back to the Sapper Leader Course in '99. And that's where I was in an operations sergeant there at the Sapper Leader Course, along with moving over to patrolling again, held instructor rider position at the Sapper Leader Course, along with committee chief in the patrolling committee.
What made you stand? How did you, as an E5, were you able to get that position of going to the Sapper Leader Course? Did you know anybody? Have any mentors? Anybody that recommended you? Any other connections? Was there any story behind that?
Well, the biggest thing is Ranger School. You have to be Ranger qualified to work at the Sapper Leader Course. It's because of the credibility that the Ranger School has. And once I accomplished that task of graduating Ranger, being Ranger qualified, because there's only 80-something, 85, 86 enlisted engineers, Rangers, Ranger qualified engineers in the Engineer Regiment. So they needed instructors at the Sapper Leader Course. I met that criteria, but at least I was promotable, as a sergeant promotable. But I still.
How did you fit in as an E5?
Well, you got to be technically and tactically proficient to fit in. You got to know your job and know it well. So I was an E5, E5P. That the standard rank to start out is usually a staff sergeant. You just got to be competent and know your job.
Anyone that you met while at the Sapper Leader Course as a very good mentor to you, someone that really inspired you to really improve yourself, become the better leader, the better engineer?
I would have to say the instructor that inspired me to be a really good instructor at the Sapper Leader Course is both phases that I worked in. One was the general subjects phase. When I first got here, I was under the wing of First Sergeant Retired Frederick Becerra. And he was a very, very competent and technically proficient instructor, very professional instructor that took me under his wing and taught me, hey, this is what's being a Sapper Leader instructor about. It's not about what I can do to the student to smoke him or, to make life miserable for the sapper, because the course alone will is tough enough for the students, never mind the instructor, making it tough for them. But he taught me that professional aspect of, hey, this is what it's about to be an instructor as far as your professionalism, know the subject matter. And his famous saying was always, hey, sapper is first. Then it's, you take care of your business and stuff like that. But when we got students, the sappers are first. We always think about sapper and their needs. And he was very instrumental in mentoring me. Then on the other side of the house was the patrolling phase that I was mentored by Major Urqueta. He was enlisted. He was a staff sergeant at the time. And he mentored me in the patrolling phase as far as being professional, technically and tactically proficient, and treating the students with dignity and respect. The course alone is going to make it tough. It's going to put the suck factor in for the students. But, it's all about being professional, and that's what's unique about the Sapper Leader Course. And the other course that's similar to us is the Ranger course. The Ranger school, they just want to smoke you and make life miserable. Sapper Leader Course, we want to bring you in there. The course alone is going to make it technically challenging, physically challenging, and somewhat set the conditions, It's a combat situation with the stressors involved in that.
Would you mind finishing out? I think you talked about your...
Yeah, my career, yes. When I got back here from Korea, as a staff sergeant, I did some operations time and then went to the patrolling phase, like I was saying, to be the committee chief. After that, I went to Germany, did some platoon sergeant time in the 9th Engineer Battalion, deployed to Ramadi, Iraq with a 28-man platoon as a platoon sergeant, did a 15-month tour in Iraq. Then once I finished up my 2-year tour in Germany, came back to Fort Leonard Wood because my daughter was going to be graduating high school at the time, because I left my family here when I went to Germany. So I came back, I was promotable to Master Sergeant at the time, then Sergeant Major Falanico was the 1st Engineer Brigade Sergeant Major, and slid me in for the Chief Instructor position to get some things going down the Sapper Leader Course, get it on the right track again. And eventually I did that along with doing some first sergeant time with the Sapper Leader Course in my company. Then I retired. 24 years.
Maybe talk about a little more detail on, you talked, I think, plenty on your first experience in the Sapper Leader Course, and then you came back for two additional times. So you elaborate maybe a little bit more on.
Okay, the second time that I got here, after Korea, I was a staff sergeant. Back to Sapper School, they needed an ops sergeant that was jump master, ranger, and, knew the operational aspects of the Sapper Leader Course. So the chief instructor was Joe Stevens at the time. He brought me down there, and I worked for him for about a year as the operations sergeant, which was a pretty good experience for me because I didn't have that much operational experiences, working throughout my career. So that was my operations time, all the coordinations, all the resourcing involved, prepping for graduation, conducting graduation, the rehearsals involved for graduation, and all the laying on all the training areas, the land, the resources. That was a big eye-opener, and it was a good experience for me too as a staff sergeant at the time to be in charge of that and coordinate and run the course, help the chief instructor run the course.
And then how did, after leaving, after your second time, what did the Sapper Leader Course give you when you went back out to the operational army in your skill set? Why were you so much? Why were you so much more valuable? Why were you? I guess what I'm trying to say is, what was the contribution of the Sapper Leader Course? I mean, obviously you went to the Sapper Leader Course, graduated, you were instructor, then you went back into the operational army. The skill set that you had at the Sapper Leader Course, you brought to the engineer?
To engineer platoon, my engineer platoon, and everything I had to deal with. Yeah. What the Sapper Leader Course did for me as far as my career is what you're asking. Well, the Sapper Leader Course makes me more technically and tactically proficient in my combat engineering MOS. As far as my demolitions expertise, gives me that confidence because it was a very rigorous and tough exam, demolitions exam. We weren't allowed to have calculators when I did the demo test in Sapper School. We had to write it all out. And yes, it kind of knocked the cobwebs out of your head as far as your long division and your multiplication, but you had to work it all out in your head because you may not have a calculator in the field. So it was very challenging, and it gave me that confidence, as that demo expertise to bring to my squad and mentor and develop my soldiers. It's all about bringing it back and training my soldiers and taking care of them with all the skills and the knowledge that I gained in the Sapper Leader Course to take care of my soldiers and to train them. That's the biggest thing, is training my soldiers. It gave me that extra stuff in my kit bag to train my soldiers.
So you definitely saw a difference between soldiers in your unit who had been through the Sapper Leader Course and those who...
Yes, there is a big difference. There is a big difference. And a lot is expected out of you when you come back, when you're a graduate of the Sapper Leader Course. That's expected of you.
Any other distinguished Sapper Leader Course graduates that you distinctly remember working with once you left Sapper School, either on deployment or any specific memories or anything like that?
Yes, there's a pretty good memory. I'm trying to think of the lieutenant's name. He was a cadet that came through the course, I would say, in about 2003. And he was a West Point cadet. They'd gotten a slot while he was in West Point. He was either a junior or a senior that year. And I'm trying to remember his name. I think his name was Conley or Conlin. And he was, soon to be a lieutenant once he graduated West Point. Well, when I left the Sapper Leader Course in 2006 and was a platoon sergeant deployed with my platoon out of 9th Engineer Battalion to our Ramadi, Iraq, we supported the 19 Infantry Battalion, the Manchus, and the infantry platoon leader that I had to work with that was providing security for my engineer platoon while we were in place in engineer obstacles was that platoon leader, that Lieutenant Conley was the lieutenant. In a real world combat situation, he's a Sapper grad, but he was infantry. But actually bumped into him and to work with him. He knew exactly who I was and asked me what I needed. He had that confidence in me because he knew that I'd worked here. Then I had confidence in him as a platoon leader because I know he graduated the Sapper Leader Course. It was one of my personal experiences with bumping into somebody that's gone through the course as an instructor.
I found that kind of fitting because he was an infantryman. And, describe the relationship between light engineer, Sapper, or just the Sapper Leader Course with relation to the infantry.
There's a lot of things, that mirror the infantry side in the Sapper Leader Course, which makes that sapper, that engineer, a better leader, is knowing the infantry tactics, knowing how to fight without doing your engineer task. You still got to need to move. You still need to conduct land nav. You need to move tactically, dismounted, find the objective, execute actions on the objective. A lot of infantry tasks that correlate with, that we did in Sapper School that, the infantry do also.
Shifting gears to a totally different question. Let's see. I wanted to talk about the history of the authorization of the Sapper tab. And you talked about this briefly when we were outside, about the challenges with the ASI and whatnot. So
it's always a lot of challenges while we were working the Sapper Leader Course. Well, the challenges working in the Sapper Leader Course with the awarding of the tab at finally being approved. Well, the tab was approved in 2005 to wear, and they were working on it the years prior to that, pushed by General Flowers, was the main advocate for the authorization of the Sapper tab. But when I went through the Sapper Leader Course in '94, when I actually went through the course, there wasn't a tab that was awarded. You just got your certificate of graduation. And you brought that back to your company, your battalion, and you had successfully completed the 28 days of training, you got your certificate of training, which was worth promotion points. But there was no tab, but still, you had that inside you that you knew that you completed 28 days of rigorous training and you were a Sapper graduate, or you completed the training, just got a certificate of completion. I mean, still, you completed all that training. You were, a Sapper leader. But now you've got a Sapper tab. I mean, it gives a little bit more leverage to the course, because there's something there that identifies you as a Sapper leader. Now it changes the whole aspect of the Sapper Leader Course. I mean, in other terms, is people wanting to come to the course for just, because they want to earn something on their sleeve, not to be that leader, that Sapper leader, what it's all about, and being able to train your soldiers when you get back. So it kind of changed that in that aspect, in that realm. And now the challenge is an ASI, additional skill identifier. What's the requirements now to, earn the ASI? Are you going to have a tab, or do you have to complete the training? So there's a lot of challenges the Sapper Leader Course have right now to work on.
The other challenge that you mentioned was while you were in the course, or while you were managing the course, is supply and the logistics portion of it, and how you were supported by your higher units. Can you walk through the different phases you were at the Sapper Leader Course and talk about the levels of support that you got? Maybe you went up when you went down the next time you were there. I guess also talk about who was in charge of the Sapper Leader Course at the time. Who was the C2, which battalion?
Okay. All right, there was three different, I'm looking at the supply aspects, the logistical aspects of the Sapper Leader Course while I was there. My tenure there in 95 to 98, from 99 to 2006, and then from 2008 until 2011. The logistical and the resourcing has always been a challenge, because the Sapper Leader Course, originally when I first worked there in 95, it was only funded just from whatever we could scratch from the brigade, the 1st Engineer Brigade. And when I first worked there, the students were required to bring Sapper boxes with training aids, the training items. I mean, as far as the, paper, pens, 100-mile-an-hour tape, 550 cord, everything was brought by the units because it was a unit-based course. I mean, we'd get 20 slots from the 307th Engineer Battalion and 20 sappers from, Fort Drum would show up, and that 40 sappers would mingle together, and they would bring their supplies with them. Now, the other supplies, yes, we'd get, our, toilet paper, toiletry items and stuff like that, cleaning supplies from the battalion supplier, the company that we were under, which was HHC 577th and the 577th Engineer Battalion. And sometimes, throughout the year, the monies would get allocated for that battalion, would have some leftover. We would be able to use that money for projects like building the new K-span overhead cover at Range 38, building a trench bunker system at Range 38, building the first urban breaching facility on Fort Leonard Wood at Range 38 with some extra monies that we scrounged throughout the battalion, which was, a combined effort from that Sergeant Major, which was Sergeant Major Ron Smith, retired, which helped us out tremendously with that. But it was always a challenge, money-wise, because, it wasn't identified as an Army-funded school. It was a functional course, which is good now because the ASI is going to authorize or allocate those monies for the course, and it definitely will not go away. It won't be categorized as a functional course. And the Sapper Leader Course will be able to get the funding. So there, when you have funding, you're able to have current and relevant, up-to-date training aids and material, like purchasing the Talon robots, to incorporate them in the patrol mission to conduct their cache reconnaissance missions, or incorporating some type of clearance mission or sappers are doing with the Talon robot. We're able to buy that. The course will be able to buy that and mold that POI based off its funding, because the POI is the funding. What's going to take to run the Sapper Leader Course? This is the POI. This is the money that we're allowed to have, and this is what we're going to have to use to buy it. That will help the Sapper Leader Course out tremendously, is the funding. It's all about funding.
When you were the chief of training, talk about your relationship with the 1st Engineer Brigade, Sergeant Major, and how you ensured that you were properly manned, you had all the equipment that you needed, stuff like that.
I was in the chief instructor of the Sapper Leader Course when I got here in 2008. The brigade sergeant major was Command Sergeant Major Falanico. And, of course, we were still underneath the battalion, which was the 577th Engineer Battalion at the time. I'd get resourced and manned through the 577th Engineer Battalion Sergeant Major that would work with the brigade sergeant major to help me out to fulfill our needs at the Sapper Leader Course as far as our manning and filling those slots out. You know, because Sergeant Major Falanico was an instructor there at the time. The Command Sergeant Major Falanico was an instructor there at the time before, and he knew, as the chief, he filled the same position I filled in as the chief instructor, so he exactly knew what I needed to do to man it. But I always gave that courtesy to the battalion sergeant major to go through the brigade to help us out, and he always double checked on me and make sure if I needed anything. And sometimes I had to home grow my own instructors to fill those requirements of instructors. That's the challenge nowadays, is the instructor manning, to get that certified instructor there with the credibility to teach the sapper leaders for the Engineer Regiment.
And that's an incredible challenge. You have to work with a wide array of courses. So describe your relationship with all the different Army courses that you need to send your instructors to.
Well, it's a give and take relationship with a lot of other courses: Ranger School, Jump Master School, Air Assault School. I mean, a lot of times you work with those chief instructors of those schools, and you work the differences out as far as, okay, I need this many slots for this course. I could provide a couple of slots for Sapper School for you. You know, it's a give and take relationship sometimes. If we can't utilize, if the ATARS method wasn't working for us, it's just so sometimes it works sometimes, but preferably you go through ATARS and get through the slots, and it's funded by the post. And the big thing is having it in the POI. It's required of the instructor to have that qualification to work at that course. So therefore, that money set aside through the SMDR process to buy those slots for Ranger School when I have to home grow a sapper instructor that needs to have Ranger School. So that's how it works. I mean, the relationship is very good. I mean, we had a lot of support from the 4th Ranger Battalion, or the brigade, the Ranger Training Brigade Sergeant Major, for slots, because he wanted to get a lot of infantrymen through the Sapper Leader Course. And we needed to get some of our instructors through Ranger Course, so it was a give and take relationship. He worked really well with us. And we had a lot of Ranger instructors come through the Sapper Leader Course, and good feedback from them.
What do they think? What do they think about it?
They thought it was a tremendous, awesome course because of the demo aspects of it. Some of the mountaineering, some of the other team and individual events that they had to do in the Sapper Leader Course.
And I think there may be somewhat of an effort to distinguish Sapper School from Ranger School, especially when budgets are in question.
Well, the difference between Ranger and Sapper School is what you're asking? Well, right back when I worked there, the difference was Sapper School wasn't, it's not a course just to skull drag you and to smoke you, to make it tough on you. The course alone will do that. What's unique about Sapper School is that the instructors are all professional. When I worked there, the instructors are always professional. They're technically and tactically proficient, and they cared about the students. They wanted the students to learn the subject matter. The course alone will smoke them. And if they failed something, the Sapper Leader Course, they could still continue with the training as if in Ranger School, if you fail a subject or you recycle and you fail again, you're booted out of Ranger School. And what's unique about the Sapper Leader Course, you can continue with the training. Even though you were short on your points, 700 out of 1,000 when you got out of general subjects, and you knew that Sapper wasn't going to have enough points to graduate, we left him in the course and he was still able to continue on with the training. To get it, to receive all that valuable training, even though he wasn't going to tab or graduate. It depends on what they were allowed to wear the tab at the time, or when the tab didn't matter. They just stayed in the course, and they were able to receive that valuable training. And that was a big deal, big difference between Sapper and Ranger. It's all about the training. The Sapper Leader Course.
Do you think the Ranger course maybe became better because of the Sapper Leader Course, or vice versa? Do they think they they compete with each other in positive ways?
I don't know if they're competing with each other in a positive way as far as Ranger and Sapper. I mean, the Ranger course, I mean, there's reasons why they have the Ranger course for them, because they have those, their ASI of their Victor identifier to fill those Ranger battalions. But at Sapper School, which is going to that now, the SQI, or ASI, the additional skill identifier to fill the slots. But at the time, I mean, Sapper School was all about just training those engineer leaders. Eventually started out in the mid-'80s as prepping the light engineer battalions to support the light infantry maneuver force, the light infantry battalions, to give them that light sapper to support the light infantrymen. I mean, as far as it's two different schools. I mean, the demolitions expertise, the amount of time spent on the op order classes and patrolling, and just some of the combat patrols, the same patrols that they do in Ranger School, are taught differently. I mean, just so much detail is put into in a Sapper School, at a pace where the student can comprehend all that information.
Anything you want to add?
I'm putting him to sleep back there.
Maybe we just go through run through the photos real quick.
All right, some of the photos.
Yeah. So it should be in order. So just give a brief caption of anything that's going on in the photo.
Okay. All right, you want to go with the photo number 1 here? Okay, photo number 1. What's unique about the Sapper Leader Course is we were the only ones on jump status here in Fort Leonard Wood. And a lot of times when we got the students from the engineer battalions that were going through the course, we incorporated an airborne operation or airborne ops in the course for those students. And the other students that weren't airborne qualified were able to conduct the Pathfinder ops, some of the other air assault ops, while the other students jumped. So this photo here is just, there's pictures of the instructors and the students. We're conducting an airborne operation out of a C-130. And it's got a picture of both safeties pulling in the static lines once that pass of jumpers have exited the aircraft. And they're just retrieving the static lines, and we've got the other jumpers hooked up, ready to go for the next pass over the drop zone. Good to go? All right, photo 2. All right, just back in the day when I was a young sapper instructor, it's a picture of us on top of the tower, just preparing students for rappelling operations off the tower. All right, next photo. As you can see, we've got some West Point cadets that I guess are planning to branch engineer at the time because they're in the Sapper Leader Course, which, awesome training experience for the cadets. I mean, here they've got the M60 machine gun. It's an older photo on the tripod, and it looks like they're setting it up for operation in that patrol base.
And generally, the cadets do fairly well.
Yes, because they don't have any bad habits. The cadets do very well. They don't have that mentality like, hey, back in our unit, we do it this way. This is how it works. I mean, they're just sponges. They absorb all that information. And if you tell them this is how you do it, they're going to do it that way, which in turn sets them up for success. Okay, another photo here is the rappel point 11. Now it's off of the installation because they changed the boundaries. It's an older photo. It's got the 2 sappers rappelling, and they're assisting the litter. It's called the litter rappel. They're assisting it down the cliff site. The next photo is an aerial photo of the original Sapper base camp. You can see the hand-to-hand combatives pit that's outside there, and some of the GP mediums that we had out there. We didn't have any hard stand buildings at the time for the Sapper base camp.
And so I just described how you mentioned the hand-to-hand, how the training kind of changes with the requirements out in the regiment.
Well, the hand-to-hand was, was brought into the patrolling side because it was a different type of physical training, different type of PT session. In general subjects, they did, their standard guerrilla drills, their running in formation, the river run, the buddy runs. But when they went to patrolling, they got that tactical mindset, then they're doing the combatives. and it was the old school combatives, the over-the-shoulder throw, the over-the-hip throw. It wasn't the new modern Army combatives that we transitioned to from there. So we transitioned from, combatives to the modern Army combatives, the jiu-jitsu, the Gracie-type combatives, the grappling. And then once that phased out, where they were teaching that in the basic training, the course basically dropped the combatives portion because, the basic trainees and, the trainees were getting the combatives training too. So it was new, it was relevant. We wanted to bring it into the course. Along with that, we were certifying them at level 1 at the time for the modern Army combatives. So the students were getting more bang for their buck as far as the unit sending that student there. They were getting combatives level 1 certified and Sapper certified. So it's a little hard, it's difficult. It's a challenge to run a course within a course, but we meet the requirements, and it's a smoker for the students though. Last photo, we're staged on Forney Airfield. We've already rigged for an airborne operation, a lot of the instructors and the cadre. And we've got a picture of the rigger here doing some checks on the T-10 parachute. And we're preparing for an airborne operation again.
That's all I have. Anything else that you want to just for posterity's sake?
Nah, I think I'm good to go. I could talk to Val Nico.
But thank you very much.
All right, no problem. Oh, hopefully I. Oh.